There's a classic Hasidic tale, and I know many of you have heard it before, but stay with me because I think it's worth hearing again. So the way the story or the mashal goes is that a man named Moshe comes to his Rebbe saying that he is miserable. He has a wife, his children, and his mother-in-law that live with him, and the house feels tiny. No matter where he looks, there's a kid screaming, there's a mess to clean up, something that needs to be fixed or get done. It just feels like they're living on top of one another. And so he asks his Rebbe, what do I do? And his Rebbe thinks for a moment and then says, okay, this is what you do. Buy a goat. A goat? The man replies, okay. And the Rebbe says, yes, buy a goat and bring it into your house. And the man looks befuddled and responds, Rebbe, did you not hear me? I said my house is packed. There's no room to move. The last thing I have room for in my home is a goat. And the Rebbe answers back, you asked for my help. No, this is my help. Buy a goat and bring it into your home. So the man sighs and gets up and says, okay, Rebbe, whatever you say. So a month later, Moshe comes back clearly agitated, and he sits down and says, Rebbe, I have to tell you, I have such profound respect for you and for your wisdom, but this is terrible. It was bad before, but now I'm at my wit's end. We're still crowded, but now we have a goat knocking things over, eating the furniture, stinking up the whole place. How in the world am I supposed to live like this? And the Rebbe answers, good, okay. Now this is what you do. Sell the goat. What? The man responds. But you just told me to buy the goat and to bring it into my house. And the Rebbe says, and now I'm telling you to sell it and bring it out of your house. And again the man sighs and he stands up. Whatever you say, Rebbe. A week later the man comes back. No, the Rebbe says. How are things at your home, Moshe? He says, Rebbe, everything is wonderful. Ever since we sold that goat, my house feels like a mansion. And it's a great story. It's a great story and it's a wise story, one that I think resonates with a lot of us. That sometimes life with family or roommates or guests, whatever our situation might be, just feels chaotic, claustrophobic. And listen, we have Elior, who is 2.5. He's just a little boy, but his presence is everywhere. Toys, messes, shouting, dishes to clean, clothes to wash. We get it. The message of the story, the takeaway, is that we don't actually understand how good we have it. That everything is relative, and when we see things differently for a little bit, when we see that things can be worse or more chaotic or more stressful, we're more appreciative of what we have here and now. But I think there's also an additional layer to this story, one that goes even deeper into a much more emotionally and complicated but important space. Because the story on its surface is about a crowded house and how hard it is to live surrounded by people. And the conversation between Moshe and his Rebbe is about dealing with those people, figuring out how to navigate a home that is constantly filled. But I think this story also exists in a different form, where we can imagine 15 years later, and we can imagine Moshe going to his Rebbe and saying, Rebbe, I once complained about how full my house was. But here I am. My children have left to start their own lives. My mother-in-law has passed away. My wife and I love each other very much, but we are so profoundly lonely right now. Even with each other, our house feels so empty. That's the part of the story that we don't talk about as much. The part of the story where if we put ourselves in the shoes of Moshe, which after all is the point of the story, and the point of the mashal is that we're supposed to put ourselves in the shoes of Moshe. If we put ourselves in Moshe's shoes, we see ourselves longing for those days of discomfort and claustrophobia. So much so that we would trade in a heartbeat even for the days when the goat was in our house. And I have a sneaky suspicion that some folks are feeling that way this morning, missing the days of the goat. All week my social media feed has been filled with posts bidding farewell to new Wolverines, Spartans, Mustangs, and Eagles. Posts that are filled with pride and excitement, but also some very thinly veiled confessions of sadness and anxiety. Which makes sense. Because when we say goodbye to our kids, most palpably to our kids who are going off to college or to a gap year, but also even to our kids who are going to be gone just for the day, in high school, in middle school, kindergarten, whatever it might be, when those moments of goodbye happen, they're loss. They're real loss. And I think that we have in our minds, based on generations of conditioning, an idea that we are only allowed to feel loss and grief when someone we love passes away. But that viewpoint is not only limited in its emotional scope, it's also dissonant with the human condition. And especially with our Jewish tradition. Our literature is filled with tearful and heartbreaking goodbyes. Parents in the Shtetl weeping as their children go off to build the land of Israel or go off to study in America. Letters of raw emotion to daughters leaving their homes to be married and live with their husbands. And lest we forget the most obvious of examples, an entire book of the Torah that is in its ikar, in its essence, a farewell address from a shepherd to his flock. Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, which we've begun and which will take us into the high holidays until Simchat Torah, when we start back at Bereshit, is Moshe Rabbeinu sending his kids off to college. It is 34 chapters of don't forget to change your sheets. Be sure to eat right and study hard. Remember who you are and where you come from. Have fun, but not too much fun. Because you're going alone. I can't be there with you, though I wish so much that I could. It's Moshe's lament. It's a confession of loss. And it's remarkable because it mirrors so well the story of parenthood. Because up until this point, Moshe Rabbeinu's words to the Israelites are often words of rebuke, of chastisement, of disbelief, of disappointment, but moments of learning. Words of parental advice and expression so that this people can grow and learn how to be on its own. And now, those words change to nostalgia. A revision of history not done intentionally, but because the emotions now attached to that history are pregnant with longing, with appreciation, with gratitude, with love. And in that regard, the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, is not just a farewell address, it's a farewell blessing. The blessing of the empty nest. But it is also a lesson, an instruction to us all, to all of us. Not just the parents of college students, but all of us who have, who are, and who will have to say goodbye to people we love. Because those 34 chapters are trying to say something that could be said much simpler if it weren't for human ego and our own fears of our emotions. If Moshe Rabbeinu were being fully present, fully vulnerable in his address, the book of Devarim would read as follows. Am Yisrael, we have been through so much together. I already miss you so much that it hurts. I never told you enough, and I'm sorry for that. But I love you. I love you so much, and I always will. That is Devarim. That is the book of Deuteronomy. Tucked there in all of the words of wisdom, the poetry, the advice, the reminiscing, that is the beating heart of it all. And it's there to teach us something very important. It's there to teach us that we don't have to tell the people we love that we love them for them to understand that we do. We can show our love in a myriad of different ways. But it is a treasure of infinite value to be told that, to be explicitly told that we are loved, especially when we're off into the unknown, when the road before us is filled with uncertainty and all our paths are new and undiscovered. The wind that guides us on our way, that wraps itself around us when we are scared or when our hearts are aching, is knowing that we are loved and that we aren't alone, even when it feels like we are. Today, this morning, is one of the holiest days of the year. It's Shabbat, and it's also Rosh Chodesh Elul. Tomorrow morning, we hear the blast of the shofar, and we are reminded by the Rambam to awake from our spiritual slumbers, to get up and walk forward as we approach the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe. And though we often think of these days and reinforce the idea that these days are days of tshuva, of atonement, of confession, of theological intensity, we must also remember that these days form the acronym Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is mine. These are the days now more than ever when we need to tell the people we love how much we love them. Because as some are learning right now, as some have learned already, and as all of us will learn at some point, it's a bracha. It is a blessing beyond words to be filled with the discomfort of sharing our space with people we love. It is a blessing for them to drive us crazy, for them to get in our way. It is a blessing to clean up their messes. Someday we're going to miss the days of the goat. We might be missing them already. And it hurts. And it's okay that it hurts. Because the only reason it hurts so much is because we loved with our whole hearts, with our cups overflowing. But with that hurt comes the beautiful opportunity to bless the ones to whom we say goodbye. Goodbye for the year, for 4 years, for a day, for forever. We have the opportunity to bless them with the wind, to guide them on their way, to comfort them when they need comforting, to give them strength when they feel knocked down and tired. That blessing isn't easy for us to give because it feels raw. It feels exposing, like we could get hurt. But that's the point. That vulnerability is precisely what makes the blessing so powerful. So here we are, Rosh Chodesh Elul, Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is mine. All of us are saying goodbye in some way. So let's say goodbye right. Let's say goodbye with all of those words of advice if we feel that they are necessary, but let's say first and foremost, goodbye with exposed hearts, with ourselves at our most honest and authentic, so that we can say, we've been through so much together. I already miss you so much that it hurts. I never told you enough, and I'm sorry for that, but I love you. I love you so much, and I always will. Shabbat Shalom, Chodesh Tov, and I'll invite you to please rise.